Hey, I'm Nick Meyer. Welcome to the Somewhat Daily Backup for Monday, 8th of March. It's Somewhat Daily because we come at you somewhat daily every Monday and Wednesday live on Twitch with all the gaming news that's fit to talk about. Today, I'm joined by Peter. I hit the microphone just when we go live, Burns.
It was an elbow. It was a swinging elbow of excitement. So I don't know if that came down the line, but I imagine it did.
It definitely did, but that's fine. It's all part of your charm. As usual, the Somewhat Daily Backup is brought to you by another charming person, and that is the hero pocketeer Tim from the Learn Programming Academy. Get your exclamation mark Tims out in the chat because the Learn Programming Academy offers classes covering the entire range of programming that are easy to watch for all skill levels, and they're almost all $20 or less. Head to lpa.dev/backpocket to download the custom Backpocket info guide on everything, and I do mean everything, Tim has to offer and become the coding genius you didn't know you always were. Peter Burns, I'll tell you what you are. You're a man who is fanging to talk about some news. So let's get into it because this news is not going to break itself. The first story, and something that has been expected, maybe done this way, but is probably coming, and it looks like Nintendo are reportedly releasing a new Switch model with a bigger screen this year. Takashi Mochizuki and Sohee Kim from Bloomberg report that Nintendo plans to unveil a model of its Switch gaming console equipped with a bigger Samsung OLED display this year, hoping the larger touchscreen can prop up demand in time for the holidays, people familiar with the plan said. Apparently, Samsung will start mass production of a 7-inch 720p resolution OLED panel as early as June, with an initial monthly target of just under 1 million units. The displays are slated for shipment to assemblers around July, and representatives of Nintendo and Samsung have both declined to comment. But Yoshio Tamura, who is the co-founder of display consultancy DSCC, said that the OLED panel will consume less battery, offer higher contrast, and possibly faster response time when compared to the Switch's current liquid crystal display, and potentially also it may be able to output in 4K to the television. Peter, is this the Switch upgrade you were fanging for?
I will say, off the bat, I'm skeptical that this is even a thing.
Really?
I don't care how many people report on it. This has just been like, the rumor has been around for 2 years, right? It's like, oh, Nintendo's got their new Switch coming in the next 6 months. New Switch upgrade coming soon. So this is like the third time we've heard definitively that there is a new Switch.
Yep.
This one seems the most likely to be true. We're far enough into their cycle for them to be doing a little refresher. They did do the Lite after 2 years in existence, so it's like we're due for another little hardware upgrade. Again, it's just a little marketing boost for them. Like, this new hardware, if the specs are true, it's not really a huge upgrade. It's nice, but it's not a game changer. Just because the dock could display in 4K doesn't mean the games are going to be anything more than Pokemon.
Yeah,
like
totally.
The internal hardware is still only running like shitty looking Doom and excellent looking Nintendo games.
Yeah.
So,
but I mean, admittedly, even now, those excellent looking Nintendo games are starting to struggle under what is essentially a mobile phone processing chip. So, the Switch is showing its age, but like you said, this is not something that's going to help those games.
No. And Nintendo is smart about how they design their games because they always have a really distinct art style, and it's often very scalable as well. So even blowing up to 1080p, Pokemon looks great.
Yeah.
Blowing up to 4K could look even better, but it's not going to make a huge difference. There's no ray tracing coming for the Switch.
Yeah, totally.
I guess the only disappointing thing is that it's still a 720p screen, which I get is like it's a small screen, but we're so used to having, like, my phone is like a 21 by 9, 1440, and 144 or 120 hertz refresh rate monitor.
Yeah.
And to go from looking at this beautiful crisp thing to the Switch, it does feel a bit cheap.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like, I think the whole system feels a little bit cheap. It'll be nice to see a screen in the same size if the dimensions stay the same of the unit, but there's just less bezel, because for me at the moment the bezel of the Switch screen is the biggest like impediment to it being a perfect system.
Totally.
So I think if that happens, I'd be really impressed and happy. And yeah, it's a good little refresher, I guess, but nothing revolutionary.
Yeah, so I've actually got both Switches. I've got the and for those watching on the stream now, I've got the normal OG Switch, and I've also got the Switch Lite. And I switched. I went back to the big one a couple of days ago because my Switch Lite battery was dead and I wanted to play something. And it really is noticeable how much bigger the actual unit is, but not necessarily how much bigger the screen is, because once you count those bezels really just chew up so much space. So I agree. Yeah. If you could get rid of those bezels to make it like the Switch Lite, you're actually talking about quite a significant amount of not necessarily screen real estate for developers, but just viewing experience for you. And I agree. I actually feel, I don't know, Bloomberg are pretty reliable when it comes to this stuff. I feel like this is by far the most likely thing that they will do, because it's not actually changing anything really for developers. If they build in some sort of upscaling for the 4K stuff, then it's not like you need to put 4K assets into your video game. You're not changing any of the internal processing, so the games are just continuing to be put out in the way that they're currently being made. And I think Nintendo kind of put themselves in a bit of a hard position with this, where you go, lots of people say they want a new Switch. Clearly, we will get a new Switch at some point, because even with Nintendo games beginning to struggle a little bit or feel like they're not necessarily living up to the full potential, whether it's graphically or just horsepower-wise, that they could be. But at the moment, like, Gus plays Doom on the Switch. I don't know anyone else who uses the Switch as their Doom playing console. That could just be because it's a terrible experience and people don't want to do that. But it does feel like one of those consoles that is either playing small indie games that don't need a huge amount of horsepower, or Nintendo games. So
it's definitely it's definitely the other. It's the other system. It's like you have a PC and you have a Switch, or you have an Xbox or PlayStation and you have a Switch. And Switch is still really the only platform that you like. In my opinion, you have to have for the exclusives. Obviously, PlayStation have great exclusives as well, but it's like,
even those are occasionally coming to PC now.
Yeah, and you can get similar experiences on PC and Xbox, but there's no similar experience to the feel of a Mario game on any other platform. So it's like or like Breath of the Wild blew us away. You know, it's like you have to have that console for those two games.
Yeah.
So it becomes an other in that way, because it's never going to be the Doom console with the specs that it has at the moment. So,
and it also has a really massive existing install base who you have sold over the last couple of years, the original Switch, the Switch Lite, different colored Switches, different kind of Joy-Cons, all this sort of stuff. If you then create a console that is significantly more powerful, then not only are you saying to those people, I'm sorry that we sold you all these other ones over the past couple of years, but also developers are now going, well, what do I develop for? Like, do I develop for the one that's more powerful and then leave this massive install base of people who have the other ones in the dust, or do I just continue to develop for the least powerful one, and the more powerful one kind of only benefits from a bit of a frame rate change? And for me, a bit of a frame rate change is not really what I'm looking for. I'm looking for like new game experiences if you have the power. So all of this to say, I will definitely get this if the screen is slightly bigger and nicer looking. But I'm in your boat when it comes to 720p. Like, you know, people are sick of me talking about the fact that I stream PS5 games to my phone now, and that's basically how I play half my video games. But even with that, streaming over the internet, I am getting 1080p and HDR on my phone. And the fact that the Switch is happening entirely in the unit and it's still nothing like that does feel like we're a few years behind now.
Yeah, for sure.
But we will see if it does happen. It feels like we're going to be hearing about it relatively soon, and you know, they want to get it out before holidays, so we will wait and see what happens with that. What we're also waiting for is to see how Aliens Fireteam turns out, because that got revealed last week. Michael McWhirter from Polygon reports that Aliens Fireteam is set after the events of Alien 3, when the deadly xenomorph is no longer a myth or secret. Developer Cold Iron Studios said in a preview event held over Discord. The Colonial Marines of Fireteam have the tools and talent to take on alien threats and are dispatched en masse by government by government order to clean house at remote space colonies. This is basically a horde mode style team of 3 third-person shooter game. Is this what you want from your Aliens franchise, Peter Burns?
This is IGN playing an alpha preview build with the devs. So they played like a 25-minute demo. So we've seen plenty of footage, and it does look pretty cool. It's hard to say, looking at the footage, how it feels, and if there'll be enough kind of variation mission to mission. It is a very Left 4 Dead style thing where you play through a campaign with, maybe 4 or 5 missions per campaign.
I think it's 3 missions per campaign. There's
3 missions per campaign?
Yeah, there's 4 campaigns, and each campaign has 3 missions, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So they're kind of a little over an hour, I guess, per mission then, if it's 25 minutes per campaign. So the idea is that these things are very replayable. And that means that there needs to be some dynamic parts to the game. This map is very tight corridors, which suits aliens, but doesn't necessarily suit being exciting to run through multiple times. So I don't know if this was the best map to show to start off with. It's definitely the most alien. I think like Colonial Marines was obviously like pretty disappointing. Alien Isolation became like a sleeper hit, kind of launched with a little bit of a like lackluster reception, and then in hindsight, people have looked back at it and gone like, that was a spectacular stealth alien game.
Totally.
So this is coming off the back of a really lauded alien release, and they haven't all been lauded alien releases, that's for damn sure. So it's a hard one to follow for sure.
I feel like I saw some excitement for this. Just looking at it, I found myself really bored watching the gameplay. I think that it definitely feels like this is a smaller in scope game. Even the idea that there's these multiple campaigns that you're supposed to run through multiple times, but each campaign has 3 missions, and it takes maybe an hour and a half to get through each one. So you're kind of looking at like 6 hours total of seeing something for the first time. And then you run through this stuff over and over again. There's different difficulty settings, sure. There's 5 classes: Gunner, Demolisher, Technician, Doc, and Recon. You then can level up each one of those classes. But it kind of just felt like, to me, and having not seen anything else, it kind of just feels like there's not too much to this game, that it is just kind of go in there, in this case, hit these corridors, wipe these aliens, and then sort of do it again. Even though this is based on the Aliens property and not the Alien property, I feel like every single video game ever made since Aliens is based on the Aliens property in some way. Like, if there are aliens in a video game, we have stolen this from Aliens. And there are much less things around the idea of genuine, terrifying, stalked by an alien horror, and it's much more like bugs just coming at you. And the gameplay of this game was bugs coming at you, and even though it's like the OG bugs coming at you, it's still like, I don't know, except for the fact that they're just shaped like the Aliens things. In this game, it didn't feel like there was anything that we've seen so far, I guess, that felt particularly revolutionary. It just felt exactly what I would have made if someone was like, here's some money and we need you to make a third-person shooter set on a spaceship. And I'm a terrible game designer.
It's hard to come up with that because I think Isolation is the perfect realization of Alien as a video game. The original film, for people who aren't super aware, is like one alien stalking a crew and a crew of like riggers and miners, not Marines. So it's like this imbalance is like all the power is in the aliens' hands. Aliens was very much the gung-ho Colonial Marines rock up and start blasting. They just start blasting. and that's what we're seeing here. But even the Aliens film, it was like it was a bit of a shooting gallery, but not to this extent. Like, it was like the aliens were still a threat. People were dying. It wasn't a corridor filled with 50. It was a corridor filled with 4 or 5 aliens. And it's like, oh, fuck, that's threatening. Whereas here it's like they lose the threat immediately. And then the only way to build that threat back up is to introduce these special aliens that are spitters or tanks or like that are bigger and move in a slightly different way. So it's like, it just feels like you're like cheapening the idea of the xenomorph by making it like a class.
and when you see it for the 100th time on your 30th run or whatever, it stops having that punch. And I mean, this is obviously, we're seeing early footage and we don't know much more else about the game. I think it's just like, by choosing to use the aliens name, that's the one thing that this game has. If you then took aliens away from it, I would sort of look at this and just go, oh, I don't think there's anything really here for me. Other games are doing a lot of this sort of stuff better. And so is aliens enough to carry a title? And in my opinion, not, but I'm hoping to be surprised and hoping that, that it is actually tons of fun to play. And even if it doesn't necessarily stick to the idea that these aliens are scary and is staying with the more hardcore on the IP side, if it is just like tons and tons of fun to play, then that's fine. And we've made an awesome game, but it just, everything feels a little bit just straight down the middle for me at the moment with this one. But
totally. Aliens is one of those franchises that's like almost better off. It gets weaker. The IP gets weaker with every new release.
Totally, yeah.
Like the strength of it, and I've listened to all of the radio plays. Audible have a bunch of like books that were converted into radio plays in the Alien universe, and they're all excellent radio plays, but they're all slight retellings of the same thing, which is the first Alien film. They find the face huggers and they have a different name for them because it's a colloquial thing that they came up with on the spot. And it's like, oh, it's the grabber. He got by a grabber. So it's like the interesting thing about Alien is that initial encounter, and this is set after humanity knows the xenomorphs exist. This is post Aliens 3, Resurrection or whatever it was. So this is like just the gung-ho era. Yeah,
it is interesting, I think, because Alien, the first film, it's a horror film, not an action film, and but it's also like basically like a character study drama as well. And you just it's like making no one really makes sequels to dramas, so it's not like we've seen the 7th sequel to Romeo and Juliet. You just keep telling the same version of it because you go, the interesting thing is that thing. So you're definitely right that every time you tell more about this IP and this world, it's like, please stop talking, because you only needed to tell one good story. It's now fine. It's time to find another good story. Aliens Fireteam is coming to PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Windows PC, Xbox One, and Xbox Series X sometime in winter, Australian winter in 2021. So we will be seeing more of it fairly soon. Something that we probably won't see any of, but if we do, we are going to have to pay PlayStation for it, is Sony patented bananas as a controller. This coming in from Brendan Sinclair from GamesIndustry.biz with the fantastic sub heading, forget PlayStation, we want Plantain Station. Game controllers have too much technology in them these days, wireless connections, analog sticks, D-pad, shoulder, face buttons. Apparently, Sony wants to do something about that, according to a recently published patent application. Quoting the application, it would be desirable if a user could use an inexpensive, simple, and non-electronic device as a video game peripheral. The application reads, the present disclosure seeks to address or at least alleviate some of the above identified problems. They don't want, like, they use bananas as an example, but they don't want it to just be bananas. They want any non-luminous passive object held by a user. It could be a mug, a pen, a glass, or fruit. Bananas and oranges. Pete, this is one of those just you patent shit because someone said something in the office and then it's like, well, we'll kick ourselves if someone makes a fortune off this later. But is there
We do that all the
something-
time.
Totally.
That's what most of our business is like. When we have busy days, it's because we're putting together patent applications for different fruits. We're trying to get the patent for M&Ms.
Yeah, we are. Yeah.
We're struggling with that one for some reason.
We're just patent trolls.
We're patent trolls. Yeah. So it's stupid.
So, but the banana thing, very stupid. But what do you think about the idea? Because, like, presumably this could be something like VR, where you've got a unit that is beaming out LiDAR or whatever, and basically they go, well, instead of using a controller, you can just hold anything in your hand, and we will map onto that thing buttons, D-pads, whatever. So it's kind of like an iPhone touchscreen when they put like analog joysticks on it or something, and they just land wherever your thumbs are. Do you think there's something in the idea of like removing the controller so that you can hold anything?
Maybe, yeah. He's like, I'll show. We've got some footage of Rudism playing with bananas. So if anyone should have the patent, it's him. But
it should be.
Yeah, I think there's potentially something to read into here about what they're doing with their second iteration of VR.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily think that they're going to be using them as controllers, like as in like mapping buttons to a banana, or mapping any input to the banana. But it could be that they're developing software that will let you pick up an inanimate object in your space, and that becomes part of the game in some way, and therefore is controlled by you having that thing. I don't know if that's closer to what it's going to be, or they're just kind of covering all bases at the moment. But it would be cool. I guess it would be handy, but how much can it map a DualSense to a banana? It's never going to be the ideal input, but if there's some way to make things feel really intuitive in a VR sense, then that's always a good thing. And if they're developing something that makes VR more intuitive, that's great.
Maybe PSVR 2 is actually just glasses, and the idea is that it's just like frames like this, and you put them on and everything comes there. And so this way it's like, well, you can always just wear them and they're just like clear lenses. So this way you don't need to also carry a controller around with you. So at any point in your life, you can just jump into VR as long as you are in the fruit department in a Woolworths.
I was going to say, Tim Apple's got something to say about that. He's going to come knocking.
Totally. So I'm sure we'll never see anything with that, but it is exciting to know that another company worth billions of dollars owns an idea that if anyone else tries to use, they will get sued. Finally, today we move on to the constant developing story around Hogwarts Legacy. And as stated last week, or a couple of weeks ago, there was the a reporter found out that one of the developers on Hogwarts Legacy had a YouTube channel where he sort of had aligned himself with some Gamergate stuff and said some things that were less than ideal, or had some opinions, I guess, that like diverged with modern thinking. Then last week, the reports came out that they were adding trans character creators to the game, and that there was discussion about whether or not to have a trans character in the game itself as a protagonist. And then it turns out at the end of last week that Hogwarts Legacy, that developer Troy Leavitt, quit Warner Brothers and Avalanche amid this controversy. So Luke Plunkett from Kotaku reports that Troy Leavitt, the game developer at the center of a controversy last month, has resigned his position at Avalanche Software, developers of the upcoming Harry Potter game, Hogwarts Legacy. Leavitt announced his decision to part ways with Avalanche in a series of tweets. Tweet 1, I've made the decision to part ways with Avalanche Software. I've nothing but good things to say about the game, the dev, and Warner Brothers. 2, I will be releasing a YouTube video about this on my channel soon. To clarify, I feel absolutely secure in my position. However, I still wanted to design for reasons that I will explain in a forthcoming video. I'm in excellent spirits and very pleased with my relationship with WB and Avalanche. Has this story reached its inevitable conclusion, Peter?
I don't know that this was inevitable. Again, you and Steph had the conversation last week that it just because he was on the team doesn't mean he was going to impact the message that the game put out. As one producer, as on a huge development team. So I think like, and he seems to think that his position was safe. Like, I don't think there was anything. There's maybe a clash of ideas. There's certainly a lot of the videos that he put up were like against PC culture, as he deemed it, and the fact that they've introduced the option to have a trans character would go against. I don't think he's necessarily anti-trans. He probably is. He's never said as much, but he's definitely said he's against PC culture. And I can imagine a man like him seeing this as an attack on freedom of development and games just being games kind of thing. So
I actually went, because I've been really fascinated by this, because this feels like one of those like super gray area ones. And I went to his YouTube channel and I watched 2 hours worth of his videos.
2 hours?
Over the weekend.
Wow.
And because the one thing that I thought, I was like, it's just a bit weird that like I saw a lot of articles referencing the names of his videos and saying like, these are the things he talks about. And he talks about Gamergate and he talks about blah, blah, blah. And one that kept coming up was like 12 ways to fix The Last Jedi. And I was like, okay, that feels like a bit of a stretch, because there are lots of people who just don't like The Last Jedi for Star Wars reasons, not because of women issues. So I went and watched that video, and all of these things were like, here are just storytelling things that I would have changed about this film. And I was like, it's weird that every time I hear this story, I just hear the names of the YouTube videos and not actually anything that he says in the YouTube videos. Because I feel like if he said something awful, someone would have found it. Like someone would have... Yeah. And when I say awful, I mean like actually like harmful, as opposed to just like butting up against different thinking, I suppose. And I couldn't find anything. Obviously, I didn't see everything, but I couldn't find anything as I watched the main videos that kept being referencing. And then when he said that he's leaving, like his decision to part ways, like he says that everything's really good, but you know, it's clearly got to do with this. It's not like this timing is, he just felt like his run at Avalanche was over. And I do feel a little uncomfortable with the idea that like, you think differently than us, and so therefore like we've forced you out of a job. And and that might not be the popular opinion within our community, and because I know a lot of people sort of like were not a fan of this guy, but I think that it just felt like he should be allowed to have opinions that don't align with everyone else. I don't think you can be supportive of someone who begins to spew genuine hate,
bigotry,
bigotry and that sort of thing. But even if you do go like, look, I think some things about Gamergate were good for the industry. While I might not agree with that, I do want to know what he's talking about. I don't just want to dismiss him and not hear him at all. So the fact that this guy now doesn't have a job just feels like a weird line that we're sort of walking on something like this, I suppose. That does he deserve to not? And I'm sure he will be fine. In fact, I'm like, there's a really good chance he becomes more popular because of this.
His YouTube channel blows up,
and his YouTube channel blows up. But it does feel a little bit like, okay, well, at the moment he can't earn a living, and should he not be able to earn a living just because he says things that you don't like? And in my opinion, like no,
I agree. Again, I don't know enough about him, and I guess we also don't know enough about the situation. It does, I don't know whether whether he felt pressured to leave, or he felt like he should leave because the game turned into something that he wasn't proud of, or whether he was pressured to leave by the studio because they were making a game that they felt he didn't represent. Obviously, there's been a lot of attention directed his way, which is going to make it awkward at any company. There's discussions that are going to happen. And I feel like the attention that happened in February is kind of what's instigated him leaving now, whether whoever made the decision. So, he's been affected by this for sure.
But you're right. Like we don't know enough about the inside of both the company, what this guy is actually like as a person hanging out, all that sort of thing. But I think the fact that he left and wasn't fired is also telling, that he's like, I'm choosing to leave this and not Warner Brothers have asked me to leave, at least according to him.
Yeah. And like a lot of his stuff seems pretty like pseudo-intellectual, like Ben Shapiro-esque, even though he has a video there where he attacks Ben Shapiro. Yeah. Well, not attacks, but like pulls apart like some of the fallacies of Ben Shapiro's kind of logic.
Yeah.
But so-called logic. But the I think this is like, it's not quite Bean Dad, but this guy isn't a villain, but he definitely has some opinions that don't align with where Warner Brothers are trying to align this game. So and for people who don't know Bean Dad was a dad that was vilified for tweeting about his kid trying to open a can of beans and not being able to. Yeah. And the internet was like, this is child abuse. It's like, it's just a fucking dad tweeting. Calm down. Calm down, internet.
Totally. And I think that we're going to see tons of this stuff, and we'll never know the answer for the truth about 99% of it. But this is definitely one of those ones where I'm just like, okay. I hope that everyone can just like move on and find their peace with this, but it does feel a little to me, even though he says a lot of things that I disagree with, that from everything that I watched, he hadn't said something where I was like, you're genuinely sparking you're doing genuinely hateful or harmful things. It's just you are doing things that I'm like, no, that's not right. Like, dude, like get your head out of your ass. But I feel like that's how I feel about Gus every single day. Like, and not because Gus says any of those things, but just I'm constantly like, dude, just get your head out of your ass. Come on. But and I can say that comfortably, knowing that he's on holidays right now and he will not be watching.
Head firmly up his ass.
Head massively up his ass. And so I know what it's like to work with these people, but also I don't think that Gus doesn't deserve to make a living. So there you go. That's all the news that's fit to talk about over the past couple of days. If you want to know more, then check back in on Wednesday for more news as it breaks. Peter, shall we back it out?
Let's back it out.
See you later.